Yeah, the Rebs and the Hogs no longer division rivals in the SEC, but still the series has been going on for a long, long time, and they get back together here in 2024, and this should be a heck of a football game with both teams playing well. This is our Rebels Live show. We come your way each and every Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Get used to it, lock in, put it on the calendar, do all those good things that you need to do, and of course, Leanne Herring is here. She makes it all go. Without you, Leanne, we've got no show. We got no channel. So thank you so much for doing this.
Well, you're too kind, but you guys do just as much behind the scenes, especially you, Mark. So I think it's mutual. It takes, I always say it takes a village, and talk about it's going to take a village for the Ole Miss Rebels in this one. Both teams, have had their share of issues, but again, they're playing for a lot this weekend. We've been talking about this game for a long time, because Ole Miss historically for Arkansas. I mean, we're still having backlashes to that 4th and 25. I mean, and it's so many years later, and that's Arkansas came in and broke the hopes when the Rebels came in with the playoff team in similar circumstances this weekend, and Arkansas is not as deep as Ole Miss. It's not as great on paper, but what we've seen throughout the season, like so much has gone crazy this season, Mark, is they have used their personnel and it's translated on the floor. And it's just, I mean, we saw what they got. We saw that week against Tennessee, what they were able to do, especially on the defense. They may not have the best guys, but what they do is they have a lot of assets and they make it work. And I know that we don't talk a lot about this Arkansas offense in comparison, but this is going to be a showdown between two quarterbacks. Watching Taylor Green's film is just something short of crazy. I don't think we talk enough about, not only is he intricate and meticulous in the air, he can get you on his feet, a real two strider. If you don't know what a two strider is, you go 5 yards, 5 yards for every two strides. He is a lot. He moves and he's very, very meticulous, but he's very sly because when you see him, he doesn't appear as fast because he's got such a big frame. But man, he can really do some damage on the ground with those legs that he's got. So Ole Miss is going to have an interesting, as elite as this defense is, we've seen, Arkansas put together a heck of a package. When it comes to big games like this. And like I said, for the Rebels, historically, things don't always go their way on the road in Arkansas. So we're going to see what they're going to bring to the table. We saw it against Oklahoma, a tough, rough start. They definitely, they can't do that again in Arkansas. So, lots to talk about. We got a guest, a lot of exciting stuff, creating news. So let's just get going.
Ole Miss coming off that 26-14 win against Oklahoma that Leanne alluded to. If you want to check out our full analysis of that game, check out the post-game show that we did right after the game. It's still posted right here on the Ole Miss channel and on the main channel. If you're watching us on the main channel, we're going to direct you on over to the Ole Miss channel because that's where we're going to be stationed going forward. But as Leanne mentions, we want to focus on the Hogs, and we got Ty Hudson checking in for us. Tusk Talk with Ty.
What's going on, Mark?
What is going on? Ty, this is Leanne. Leanne, this is Ty.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks for coming on the show. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Big game in Fayetteville. I know you got a lot to share. I mean, we're just before you came on, I couldn't help. I've been watching Taylor Green's film. Man, that kid is just something to watch. I don't think we hear enough about him. And I mean, you get to see him in the inside and out of him. So you definitely go into tech, but he's gonna be one of the, I think, most difficult quarterbacks as far as what the way he is in the air and how it can get you on the ground that Ole Miss has faced this season.
Yeah, Green's had quite the journey at Arkansas so far. Of course, he's a transfer from Boise State. Numbers were certainly questionable at Boise State, kind of all over the place. And Bobby Petrino hops on board, and that was his guy from day one. And I was present through spring and fall camp. There was no competition. He was clearly probably the best athlete on the field. And, in practice, you can only get so much of that because they're not going to tackle the quarterback. So you don't really know what you have until you see him in game time situations. This year, it started off great. Their first 6 quarters of play, Arkansas's offense looked unstoppable. And then the second half against Oklahoma State happened where they couldn't get out of their own way. They put the defense in a lot of bad situations, and not just that game either. You can look at the Auburn game, which was an ugly win, UAB, which was an ugly win, and then you have A&M, which was, kind of a mixed bag as well, a game that you actually were competitive in and found a way to lose that one as well. But A&M looks to be like one of the, if not the best team in the SEC, certainly one of the top 3 teams in the SEC. And then Green kind of hits this he gets a lot of criticism, and rightfully so there towards the middle of the season. He's throwing behind receivers. He doesn't seem to be targeting anybody else but Andrew Armstrong, who is a prolific wide receiver, but that's it. Like, that was the offense when you talk about throwing the ball. It was getting it out to Armstrong. And really the last 2 or 3 weeks, we're starting to see Taylon Green, he's getting comfortable. He's getting a little bit more time in the pocket. When you look at his deeper analytics, he's been really good in a clean pocket scenario this year. And he's jumped up. I think most of the year he was completing about 60, maybe 55% of his clean pocket throws. Now that number's up to about 69%. Mississippi State is one that I would tell fans to pump your brakes. Don't get too excited. Yes, it's great that it was certainly a step in the right direction.
58 points, Ty.
Yeah,
that was my next question. I was going to say, was that a fool's goal? Was that fool's goals offense? Against performance against Mississippi State? Because that's, Ole Miss fans are getting excited about that, but again, it's Mississippi State.
Well, they were missing something like 2 starting or 3 defensive line, three guys at the front 7 were missing for Mississippi State, and they're already questionable. They're the worst, statistically speaking, whether it's in conference, out of conference. They're the worst defense. They might be they're the bottom 2 defenses, or one of the bottom 2 defenses that Arkansas has played this year, and the other one would be UAPB. So, they're trash. Mississippi State is not a good defense, and it sucks for Coach Levy over there trying to rebuild something. You hope that's not a Chad Morris situation for Mississippi State, but I don't know if I want to call it fool's gold. I liked what I saw, and you can't hide execution. You can't hide that.
Yeah.
You could see that on film. However, PFF, one of the things I appreciate about PFF, look at how they grade out versus actual quality teams. Go back and look at the stats. Sometimes they don't always add up, but you can see the grades start to drop against better opponents. And so I expect their Arkansas's offensive grades, I'm talking about PFF grades, take that with a grain of salt. They'll probably drop compared to Mississippi State, right? You talk about a monster of a defense. And while the talent gap is there, it's not super wide. I know that Ole Miss, of course, they grabbed our former linebacker, Christopher Pooh-Paul. We had a lot of drama with that scenario, and no doubt, I knew when he went to Ole Miss, this guy's going to be good there. And I thought he was going to be good no matter where he went, and he's been unbelievable at Ole Miss. I kept telling fans in my own Discord, some of my own mods telling me that, no, we can replace Pooh-Paul. He's replaceable. He's a damn good linebacker, and he's gonna ball out, and that's what he's done there. But there is a little bit of a gap, not a big one, right? They've definitely, Tennessee's. You talk about Tennessee having a top 20, top 15 roster in college football. A&M, obviously, one of the top 5 rosters, and that was a close game. It's just going to be about A, performing better at home, and B, can they keep this rhythm going with Ole Miss where there's been a win and then a loss, a win and then a loss, right, between Arkansas and Ole Miss. Maybe they could keep that rhythm going, and it's their turn to get the win. But it's going to be easier said than done because Jackson Dart, that offense, Lane Kiffin, they look like the real deal. I realize their non-conference schedule wasn't superb. They've got some easy wins, but damn, you can't help but watch them and just be extremely impressed with what they're doing on both sides of the ball. This could be one of, I think everything's at the table. It could be a blowout win for Ole Miss. It could be a close win for Ole Miss. It could be a close win for Arkansas. Everything's at the table, but that's kind of been the story of Arkansas since Sam Pittman's been here. God only knows what's going to happen on Saturday at 11 o'clock in Fayetteville, but I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, Ty, I'm going to say it this way. And Leanne, we've got Ty on all the time. Great friend of the show, good buddy, and comes on here all the time. We have great conversations. And if I wasn't obvious about this, Ty, you could probably tell between the lines that I was setting you up for a bad season. Like, I don't see it. I don't see where this team's going to be any good early in the season or before the season started. But I got to say, they have proven it against enough good teams to this point. This is a really good football team. when you can hang within 4 points of Texas A&M, when you can beat Tennessee, when you can rack up Mississippi State's not a good team, but they're not giving up 58 points to anybody else.
That's true.
They're playing really good foot. Really, the only down, and I did not, ironically, for all the times that I've seen Arkansas play this year, I did not see the LSU game to see what happened there because I expected that to be a nail biter. And going back to that Oklahoma State game, we commiserated about that a number of times. I still don't know how they let them off the hook, because if those two teams played today, they're winning that game by 2 or 3 scores. They're a much better team than Oklahoma State. This has got this has to be kind of a fun season, even though it's not necessarily going to end with some impressive record or anything, but they are lining up against really good teams and winning these games or competing down to the final 5 minutes.
Yeah, and it goes back to what I said. Sometimes you really don't know what you're going to get. And that second half against Oklahoma State was a really good example. They're not winning. Listen, if they lose the turnover battle, they're going to lose that game. And it doesn't matter if it's by 1 turnover or by 4 or 5. And that's what happened in the second half against Oklahoma State. It's what happened against A&M. It's LSU. Just good Lord, they looked legit. And then they went toe to toe with Ole Miss the week before. We thought, we're coming out of a bye week. They had this emotional win over Ole Miss, and Ole Miss gave them all that they got. And maybe we could take advantage from what happened in that game. And they came in and, they won by 24 points. It really never felt like Arkansas was in that. Well, it did feel like Arkansas was hanging around until the second half. And again, it's been some of my criticisms about Pittman since he's been here. Sometimes they just don't come out the gate in the third quarter on fire. They just, it seems like that's where they've given up a lot of yards over the years, a lot of points. And then they kind of hang around long enough, to keep it a game into the fourth quarter until the opponent just escapes. And that's kind of what happened against LSU, although LSU's that good. I mean, you talk about a talent gap. That team is loaded. But it speaks to, Ole Miss the week before at Baton Rouge was able to go toe-to-toe with those guys. So, again, they're going to have their hands full against Ole Miss, but they've had their hands full against a lot of teams this year. They've found ways. If they could just stay out of their own damn way, Mark, they could probably get some upsets. They got the one against Tennessee. They've got Texas coming up, Ole Miss, Texas, and they've got to finish off the year at Mizzou. We'll see what they could do. One of my poll questions I had on my last live show was how many of these last 3 conference games, how many do they win? And the answers were the options were 0, 1, 2, or 3, and 2 actually won out. So folks seem to think, Arkansas fans seem to think, at least in my crowd, they believe that they can grab a couple of wins. And I don't know that I said I would probably lean on maybe 1, but I am very optimistic about what they're capable of doing. It's just a matter of staying out of their own way. And they were, and I haven't actually looked this number up. Last week going into the weekend, going into Mississippi State, Arkansas was, I think, second to last in the SEC in the turnover difference or turnover ratio. I mean, that's a really bad number. Of course, Auburn, horrible. I think they're bad, -10 in the turnover ratio. Arkansas was -5. Of course, now that number has changed dramatically, but that's an area they've got to figure that out, right? Minimize the mistakes on offense and capitalize the opponent's mistakes on defense. They do that, Mark, they can go toe-to-toe with anybody that's left on this schedule. I'm not saying they would win them, but they can go toe-to-toe with folks, certainly.
No doubt. And hearing what you're saying, it's almost like a mirror image of a lot of difficulties that Ole Miss has been facing. They've come really close, and it's just like you're looking at 2 mirror teams in Arkansas as far as start trying to start strong to finish. I mean, in that Oklahoma game, I mean that first half was not the Ole Miss offense defense that we're typical to see. I mean,
Yeah.
Oklahoma had its own set of chaos and everything, and Ole Miss just couldn't find its footing. But again, like you said, I think that these are 2 teams that have the ability. Like Ole Miss, we talk about it on paper. They're elite. They translate. They should win this game. Vegas thinks so. But again, you got 2 really gritty teams that are trying to make a gauntlet. I mean, Arkansas right here being bowl eligible, and just some of the things you described about Arkansas seems to be some of the difficulties that Ole Miss is facing. It's just like, will it translate on the field? Both teams are capable of doing it. But who's going to outduel? And I think I'm glad you brought off the turnover issue, because Arkansas has a lot of assets as well as Ole Miss, but they tend to bite themselves in the foot with a lot of penalties. I mean, we saw Ole Miss do it against Oklahoma, with that offensive line, and it's just like I said. I told Mark, this is a game that I've been, this is a game that scared me for a long time, because historically, like I said, Arkansas goes in there and they may not have all the personnel in the world, but they found a way to make it work. And they've been playing a lot better ball the second half. And, we've been talking a little bit about Taylor Green, just how dynamic he is. But one of the things we don't talk a lot about is how did quarterbacks like Jackson Dart and how did quarterbacks like Taylor Green, with the elite ability they have, where does it start with? That protection up front. We've seen Ole Miss offensive line have its hesitations and kind of not stepped up and played to the role until this last leg of the tour. Can you talk about a little bit how that offensive line for Arkansas, they've really just set Green up to be really effective, whether he's taking it to the air, taking it to the ground. I mean, looking at his films, they set him up to be able to, whether it's a rollout pass, screen bubbles. I mean, that Arkansas offensive line has just really done a dynamic job in giving him enough time to operate. And I think a lot of people forget, you can have a dynamic quarter like Green and Dart, but if you don't have that front seven doing its job, it can be very difficult, especially in games like this. I mean, you got Ole Miss fighting for to live another day to playoffs. You got Arkansas trying to be bowl eligible here. So can you talk a little bit about how that offensive line has just really done a nice job setting up Green to be able to do what he does at the level that we've seen?
Yeah, well, it's kind of been a rotating door at a couple spots on the offensive line. They had Blackstock at right tackle, and the guy, I mean, I'm just going to be real with you, his numbers were awful. He's given up a lot of hurries and sacks. Well, then they move him over to left guard. They move a Marion Harris out to right tackle, and they're trying to find that sweet spot. And I don't know, Marion Harris is another guy on the stat sheets, not great, but just enough, right? Some of it is Taylor Green. I don't know if he's sliding his protections better, if that's some of it. Obviously, when you're Taylor Green and he probably runs, I don't know, legit low 4.5, 4.4. I mean, he moves. Maybe that has something to do with it. But they, Carmona, the transfer out of San Jose State at left tackle, has mostly been a very solid replacement. We saw that in spring and fall camp. I mean, I said all along, I think he might end up, this might work with him at left tackle, making that move from somewhere like San Jose State coming into the SEC. Yeah, the protection has gotten better. And again, it's a clean pocket. The clean pocket numbers are going up because Green, we talk about confidence. It's also confidence in those guys, like you mentioned up front on the offensive line. It's that these guys got my back. They're going to give me some time in the pocket where I don't have to do everything with my feet. I don't have to do everything with a rolling outside of the pocket. I can sit back here and go through my progressions, which he's also doing a better job of. He's seeing the entire field. But that confidence, you just see it. You could see it. Took a little time off against LSU, but we'll just have to look past that, I guess. But other than that, the last 2 or 3 games, he's done a really good job. And again, it speaks to that comfortability factor and those guys up front. They're also getting Patrick Kudus back, who has not played all year, and they've plugged him in at the left guard spot, which is that's going to probably be where he ends up, moving forward, assuming he comes back next year. He'll probably be an interior guy, right or left guard, but they're still trying to figure it out a little bit, especially at that right tackle spot. But overall, they're making, it seems like they're making the right moves. And they're playing a lot better up front. They really are. The protection has gotten much, much better.
Got our guy Ty Hudson here from Tusk Talk with Ty. You can catch it right here on YouTube, so it's just a click away. When's the next show, Ty?
Well, it's Halloween, so I got to take my daughters trick-or-treating on Thursday night, and I typically go live on Thursday night. I'm going to try and go live tomorrow and break down this Arkansas Ole Miss game, give my prediction there, and try to figure out what we're going to do. I thought we were going to do a post game for Friday. Arkansas basketball takes on TCU down in Texas, but it's not televised, so I can't do a post game if I can't see it. So tomorrow might be the last show of the week unless I bring on a surprise guest or something. But yeah, I'm certainly going to have to do tomorrow's show, and it'll be a daytime live more than likely. But yeah,
going a little bit off track. I actually started in Kentucky, so we know about John Calipari pretty well. How's Arkansas loving this new adjustment? How's it been for recruiting? I mean, it's got to be exciting for basketball season. Even if things don't go well football, at least you got an interesting basketball season to look forward to.
yeah, their history, and we know with this is their third Hall of Fame coach they've had at Arkansas. Of course, Eddie Sutton, Nolan Richardson, and now obviously Coach Cal. The excitement is pretty freaking high, especially after what we saw against KU. Really excited about what they do. I mean, Boogie Fland, oh my gosh. I'm already seeing NBA mock drafts that are starting to climb him up the board a little bit. I think he'll end up being probably be a lottery pick. I think there's a possibility of that, even at 6'2" for a point guard. He's going to be fun to watch. And DJ Wagner, they brought Brazil back. Oh, speaking of basketball, I mean, you guys got a hell of a coach yourself. Beard is going to.
I know I know it's exciting. It's exciting for Ole Miss. Like I said, I know did a great job against Illinois in the exhibition. That infamous private match against Houston. At the neutral site. That's what you got to love about basketball season. It's a whole different animal, a whole different beast.
Yeah.
Definitely, I always say it always goes a lot faster because there's so many games in a week. It's just different. But yeah, it's exciting to see, like you said. How the stock of a team that, typically with Arkansas, it's not a team you hear a lot about SEC, but has a lot of historic Hall of Fame coaches, and now Coach Cal coming, I'm sure it raises a stock for recruiting and all sorts of things. But yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting to be at that time when you got a football program being successful, but basketball season's right around the corner. You got something to look forward to, no doubt.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I can't wait to cover it.
Ty, give us the lowdown on Braylon Russell. Was that a one-off last week, or is he emerging as the man?
Well, so Jaquindon Jackson, Pittman said today, probably going to be doubtful again for Ole Miss. Russell, listen, I saw him up close in person. He's built like a tank. He's got tree trunk thighs. He's just thick from the waist down, Mark. I mean, he's just kind of a beast. He bounces, or defenders bounce off of him. Very fun to watch. Now, he's not elite speed, but he's got really good vision. We saw him knock off a 70-plus yarder against Mississippi State. He cramped up towards the end of that run, so he wasn't able to score, and Mississippi State was able to tackle him. I've said I think he's going to be the future at running back for Arkansas. He's another Arkansas studly running back. We know they have a history of that down here. Even before the Darren McFadden era, you had Cedric Cobbs. You just keep going further and further back. We've pumped out some pretty good running backs out of this state, and he's going to be amongst those when you talk about some of the best that have come out. He looked good. He got more and more comfortable through fall camp, and I was wondering, Pittman talked about this a while back. Through spring camp, he said that, well, we know he's probably, he might get some carries. And then as fall camp progressed, Sam admitted, like, okay, he's going to definitely get some carries. And now it's like, okay, he's probably going to be the starting running back. That's a really good trajectory. Even if it's because Jaquindon Jackson is hurt. And it takes me back to, Mark, and I'm not comparing him to Darren McFadden, but this is a very similar path for Darren McFadden. Darren McFadden came in. You already had Peyton Hillis, and they already had Darius Howard at running back. Darius Howard was a monster, big physical back, capable of picking up short yardage. DMAC had to work his way into that rotation. Howard gets a little banged up. DMAC takes off, and we knew immediately right then, okay, there's our running back of the future. I think this could be Russell. I'm not saying he's going to be a two-time Heisman runner-up, okay? Not saying his Doak Walker Award two-time winner here. He certainly has it within him to be special at Arkansas. He's just things, got some hurdles you got to jump over. Sam has got to survive the season for that to happen, I think. Or hell, it may not matter, but which I think Sam will survive. Sam is safe. I think the Sam getting fired crowd is probably completely gone now. Well, not completely gone, but at least they've toned down a little bit. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be interesting to see how Ole Miss matches up with him, especially with this revitalized offensive line. can Russell, he's not going to do what he did against Mississippi State to Ole Miss. It's just not going to happen. But he could have a pretty good game. And again, Mississippi State, is that a confidence builder for him? Is that a confidence builder for the offensive line? And can they build off of that performance? So I don't know. Rodney Hill is expected to play, transfer out of Florida State. He's expected to get some carries. But other than that, between those two and DeBinion, you're going to get kind of a mixed bag at running back. But more than likely, yeah, Braylon Russell's going to carry the workload.
So, Ty, here's a question that I've been asking you for years, depending on the matchup, and I've hit up Leanne a few times on these kind of questions. So, obviously, if it's Arkansas, Texas A&M, if it's Arkansas, Mizzou, if it's Arkansas, LSU, there's some kind of history there. I'll hit you up on, what do these programs, how do they feel about each other? What's the level of angst and hatred and all that, and so forth. And I love always to get your take. I could never get enough of it when it's Missouri week to get your thoughts about how much you guys can't stand Missouri. But when it comes to Arkansas and Ole Miss, these two teams have played, as I mentioned off the top of the show. This is going to end here in the next couple of years, but they've played every year since 1992. This has been a division rivalry, but I don't have a real feel for the relationship between Arkansas and Ole Miss. So how would you characterize that?
There is history between Arkansas and Ole Miss that dates all the way back to the 60s. Of course, Arkansas in the Southwest Conference, Ole Miss in the SEC. They didn't play on a yearly basis, but there is history there. Is it enough to say that it's like a legit, mighty rivalry in the SEC? Probably not. I would say it's more of just an SEC West rivalry. It's more of a regional rivalry. And I've gone to a lot of games, talked to a lot of fans. Ole Miss fans are typically some of the most respectful people. Never felt like they had a hatred for Arkansas, and the same for Arkansas fans. Now, you got to ignore Twitter. If you go to Twitter, you think that this would be the most heated rivalry of all time, especially with the Christopher Pupal drama from a year ago, and obviously he transfers to Ole Miss. You're going to get a lot of that on Twitter this weekend, but for the most part, I've never considered, and I don't think they either consider this a heated, angry, God, I hate them kind of rivalry. Is it more of a rivalry than Mizzou, despite my feelings towards Mizzou? Yes, because of, like I said, that history that the two teams share. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's like a pure hatred. It's going to be, would it shock me if I read on Twitter Sunday morning that some Ole Miss fans and Arkansas fans got into it on Dixon Street Saturday night? No, wouldn't be shocked at that at all. Fans fighting in the stands? No, wouldn't be shocked at that at all. Sometimes that's just Hog fans being Hog fans. Mizzou's a different story, right? Mizzou, it is just, I cannot hate that school, but it's still not a rivalry, Mark. It's still not a rivalry. I will die on that hill. It's manufactured by the league, and we all know it. At least Arkansas and Ole Miss is organic. But yeah, it's I don't know where I'd put it on the totem pole. Obviously, Texas, for Arkansas fans at least, is number one on that rivalry. Texas fans probably not the same anymore because we haven't played on a year-to-year basis since the Southwest Conference. But yeah, it's a rivalry, but I would say it's probably more of a regional rivalry, a little less known, and yet there's been some great games. You guys talked about the 4th and 25 earlier. I still remember watching that, my mind just being blown at what I was watching. Yeah, there's been some memorable moments. There's been some fun games. There's at least that when you talk about this, but I think it's probably more of a regional rivalry than anything.
Any thoughts about the Hogs, Leanne, and what Ole Miss fans think about Arkansas?
I think Ty said it pretty well. I mean, it's a rivalry. There's a lot of history there, of course. Like you said, I think it got blown up, of course, when we lost when they lost Chris Pupal and we got them here. But I think everyone still sinks in that 4th and 25. That one hit hard, hit close to home. It's just like, talk about Ole Miss has been in that situation times, but when you're that close to playoffs and you just see your dreams right there, and of all things on a 4th and 25, it seems like those have always been our plague, no matter who's the coach, no matter who's the analytics. but I think it's always been a respectful rivalry. I think from a standpoint too, it's not like an LSU Ole Miss where I said, that there's just vengeance there. I mean, when you're talking Ole Miss LSU, that's a rivalry, but that's one that gets ugly. We saw it happen in Death Valley, but again, I think this is a fun kind of rivalry that has history, but I don't think there's any angst there. I mean, I know Arkansas fans. I've covered the game a couple times early in my career, early covering Ole Miss, and you said it well. I don't think that there's a bad blood. There's a kind of thing. I mean, it gets heated. Both fan bases are going to have their fan bases, but I think it's a pretty respectful rivalry. I think that for Ole Miss, especially going into this one, I always say that Arkansas is a tough place to play. They're a tough team to play, but I always say for Ole Miss historically, Arkansas has been a little bit of a thorn in the side. So you can't help but think that Ole Miss can't let its guard down. They're definitely not going to be able to come to approach Arkansas the way that they approached Oklahoma. I think for both these teams, you kind of alluded to that. They can't be second half teams. They can't have really good third and fourth quarters. Both these teams are going to have to try to find a way early on to start strong and close strong because, like you said, there's so many. I always say that in games like this, especially in the SEC, it comes down to details and who can play a cleaner game because you mentioned it about turnovers, about penalties. These are two things that both these teams have struggled. So who's going to play the cleaner game? You got two really dynamic quarterbacks. You got an Ole Miss defense that's been elite, but it's been helped. But we've seen it exposed. I saw one of the comments, talk about how Kentucky and LSU left a blueprint, and very much no one expected Kentucky defense to come and give Jackson Dart a run. So I mean, there's a lot out there. So both these teams are going to have their work cut out for them. And like you said, I don't think this is going to be a blowout. Quite honestly, I think it's that 7 points for me. Even I think this is going to be another field goal game. Special teams. I think we've seen in so many games where special teams and field goals have really played. It's going to say, is Sam Pittman going to be the better gambler here? Is Lane Kiffin going to be the better gambler when it comes down to it?
Yeah, Coach Pittman has dropped the analytical part of how he coaches, or so he says. So I don't know that you'll see a lot of. Well, I don't know. They might go for it on fourth down. They are at home. There's a pretty big benefit to Ole Miss for this being an 11 a.m. kickoff. I wish this was a PM game. Oh my gosh, it'd be so fun under the lights. It's always fun in Fayetteville. But it's mistake-free football. Who plays the cleanest football? I agree. It could very well come down to a field goal. Every morning it's a coin flip for me. What are we doing on Saturday? How's this gonna come out? And can Arkansas stay out of their own way? How well does Ole Miss play? Do these two teams play a clean brand of football? Who knows what to expect on Saturday? It's going to be fun, I think, regardless.
Ty, we appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
You are welcome to stick around if you'd like. Leanne and I are going to run down the SEC schedule and look at a few other things as well, but we appreciate if you need to take off as well. So,
well, yeah, I got to get out of here. I got to go do something here. Of course, the wife's giving me a checklist of things I need to get done before I go pick up the girls from school. So I'm going to go do that. But I do appreciate you having me on. It was very nice to meet you as well, Leanne. Thank you.
Nice to meet you too. Thank you. Hope to have you down the road just to talk some ball and recruiting, on the off season, because it's going to be an exciting one after this one. But yeah, so thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Ty. All right, our guy Ty Hudson chiming in on Arkansas, Ole Miss, as you see it right there, 7.5 point favorite. You're over under at 53.5, noon Eastern, 11 Central. Now, looking at the rest of the SEC, I don't know if you got a chance to see any Texas A&M LSU last Saturday night, but that was an exciting game. That was kind of the tale of two halves as LSU jumped out by 10, could have been up by 20 plus. They had control of that game, left a lot of points on the field. Texas A&M comes out of nowhere. Marcel Reed takes over at quarterback. They win, and we got one undefeated team left in the conference, and it's Texas A&M, and they go to South Carolina, and I think that's a sneaky, difficult place to play. Team that's aside from the Ole Miss game, Ole Miss is the one team that took care of South Carolina. Everybody else, they played a great game against Bama, LSU. Of course, they beat Kentucky like a drum. South Carolina's been a tough out, and so that might be the case this weekend against Texas A&M.
No, I mean, no doubt. Talk about who would have ever thought that Mike Elko and what he's done, this turnaround, because again, the Aggies have been such hot, high and low kind of roller coaster team. I don't think any of us thought, including myself, that it would be Texas A&M in the end, the only undefeated team left in the SEC, so to speak. And they've made a run. But like I said, kudos to the changes that they've made. I think Marcel Reed coming in, he's a kid who was actually committed to Ole Miss, and then Texas A&M was able to get the work in there and be able to flip him. A&M's really gaining a momentum. They had a lot of key recruits on that week. I mean, talk about a stage on the recruiting trail. We'll talk a little bit about two key recruits that Texas A&M brought in this weekend tomorrow on our new debut recruiting show. But man, again, as much as Texas A&M, and I like what Marcel Reed is doing, I think he reminds me a lot of Lamar Jackson in the way he operates and what he's doing for that Texas A&M. So I think that offense is going to be a lot for the South Carolina. But again, I think what we've seen, even against Ole Miss being able to handle business, at South Carolina just always finds a way to create some kind of chaos. So South Carolina may not come up with this win. I just think that Texas A&M has done a lot of improvements. But again, Texas A&M is still trying to find its footing. It found it against LSU, and I think when you play in College Station, I think that's another rivalry between LSU and A&M that gets a little bit heated. And I think there was a lot of factors that helped that momentum. But I think for the Aggies, we're going to see if they can take this recipe, this alchemy that they found, at home, with Marcel Reed anchoring this offense, to see how they operate. And I think it's going to be a little bit tougher than we think for A&M to. So we're going to see how he plays on the road. I like Texas A&M to handle business on the road. I think if they continue doing what they're doing, they're definitely playing to their strengths, their defense. But I do believe South Carolina is going to give them a run. So I think what do we say, 2.5? I like South Carolina. I like South Carolina on this one, and I'm going to take South Carolina on the points on this one, because I still think that South Carolina is a tough way to play. Going up against Beamer ball, it's kind of out there. It's kind of like when you face that third option offense, or you face it. I think South Carolina always finds a way for a team, especially like Texas A&M, who's got a little bit of momentum, who's doing everything right and coming off a big win. They always find a way to kind of play those mind games with them. So I expect that it's going to be a lot tougher job on the road for Texas A&M, but we'll see how they adapt and they adjust. But I like South Carolina in this one.
Kind of a low-key week in the SEC, as a lot of teams are going out of conference, like Mississippi State against UMass and this Oklahoma game against Maine. And there's only, let's see, 3-6, that'd be 12, only like 10 teams playing. So a lot of teams with bye weeks this week, but we do have, again, Ole Miss, Arkansas, that's going to gain most of the attention. Texas A&M, South Carolina as well. And those are really the two, along with Georgia, Florida, of course, and few people giving Florida much of a chance, but the Gators playing better ball than a lot of people expected under Billy Napier. Leanne, are you ready for this one? Adam coming in with this one. Okay. The Grove should be furious at Dart for his mediocre play. It seems like he is more interested in being on the cover of GQ than playing high quality football. Adam.
You can say people are entitled to their opinion, and we got to remember these are young kids and whatnot. And at the end of the day, Dart has his faults. He makes his mistakes like any quarterback does. But, when an offense operates or when a defense operates, it's on everybody. Because, again, I will say it, defending Dart, he hasn't always played the best ball. But a part of Dart not being able to do what we've seen in the past, what he's been able to do productivity-wise, translate on things, it's going to go back to that offensive line. There's been struggles on the offensive line. So we have to remember, similar to what's going on in Arkansas. Arkansas made those adjustments. They have a dynamic quarter in Taylor Green. But he also talked about it. Until they made those moves and adjustments, Taylor Green could not reach his potential and not get. Same could be said for Jackson Dart. Isn't it an excuse? Not all the time, but these kids are going to have bad games. Is it mediocre play? I guarantee you we wouldn't be saying mediocre play had we won those 2 games at LSU, had we won that game at Kentucky at home. So again, the kid's not going to always play his best ball. Should we expect better of him? Of course. But again, I just don't believe just trying to blame Charlie Weiss on the offense not operating correctly. They tend to take the hit. The quarterback's going to take the hit because he's a leader. But again, everybody's got to do their job for every guy to be able to do what they do best. Like I said, that offensive line is off. Jackson Dart's going to be off and then all his receiving guys, like I said, we have some of the best receivers at every position, whether it be tight end, wide receiver, running back. Jackson Dart does not have lack of to be able to make it, whether we're going in the air or whether he's taking the ground. And we've seen Jackson Dart have to scramble in a lot of situations that we shouldn't be putting him. And again, it goes to that offensive line. So, sometimes we might have to realize that the mediocre play is not because Jackson Dart isn't doing well. It's because other people too aren't doing their job. Everybody's got to do their job. I preach it to my own kids when they play lacrosse. You can be a great athlete, and there's no doubt that Jackson Dart is, but for him to be able to reach his potential level or play like we are used to seeing him, and I think that's the thing about it. We're used to seeing him in this dynamic, highly passing type offense, but at the end of the day, we want wins, and I think that goes back to Ole Miss taking control of it. We saw it in the second half of Oklahoma. And that's why I said if we can take control and use that run game, it wasn't the best version of our run game against Oklahoma, but those adaptations and adjustments that they made on both sides of the ball, that's how we're going to have to come out against Arkansas. I know we're used to seeing Jackson Dart throw darts in the air, but at the end of the day, we want to put points on the board. And if that means running the ball, then get that offensive line operating so Jackson Dart can operate.
Adam wanted us to check out the stats. I'm not seeing anything that's that horrendous. His last time out against Oklahoma, that's a more than solid game. 22 of 30 for 311 through the air with a touchdown and no picks in 30 attempts. Now, the LSU, you'd like the completion percentage to be higher than that a little bit, but playing in Death Valley, I'd have to go check out the game tape to see if there was anything really there. Although I remember from our post game talking about the LSU defensive front and how much pressure they were putting on Jackson Dart. So he was under fire that entire game. The South Carolina game, he only went 14 of 27, but 285 yards on 14 completions. He was hitting for big plays. And if you remember that game, Ole Miss had control of that game. It became a grind it out, just get to the finish line. We've got a big lead, run the ball, get out of town type of game. And overall, 71% completion percentage, 15 TDs and 3 picks. There's about 90% of the teams out there in college football that would take that in a heartbeat.
And I think going back, to alluding what I was really impressed about the adjustment in that second half, not that once again, I'm going to stress, we can't be a second half team again, going on the road against Arkansas. But I will say what was another solid thing to see Jackson Dart in this offense, as much as we're used to seeing this offense up tempo, that last couple drives of being able to be in control of that game and slow things down, I think really caught that team off guard because they're so used to us running. But I mean, that we, in the no huddle kind of thing, taking our time, that slow, long drive, just kind of taking them to it. That I think was very impressive that we haven't really seen the Rebels put themselves in that situation. But I think it showed great control on Jackson Dart's and his offense being able to, make a drive, make a play, but then, let's slow things down. Let's control it. Let's finish it. And I think that that's the kind of ball that we need to play because at the end of the day, that puts wins on the boards. I mean, again, I think it's great that you're going to have a passing game. You have to have a balanced attack, whether it's on the ground, the air. I'm always going to say that. But in these games, in these situations, especially on SEC play, that's why I'm such a fan of being strong on the run game, because I think the run game, if you have it on point, it eventually opens up the pass. But you don't want to put Jackson Dart in too many opportunities where he's having to scramble or have to go in deep. And, with the way Arkansas is going to come in defensively, now they don't have our kind of defense, but they have some playmakers, that could cause trouble. And we don't want to put Jackson Dart in that kind of situation. Again, like I was talking about Arkansas, that offensive line sets up and gives Green enough time to be able to operate, whether he's going on the air and the ground. I mean, the kid's super dynamic. And that's the thing about it. If you don't set your quarterback up right, then he's not going to do what he's able to do, regardless of who's out there in the backfield.
All right, folks, we do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And while I'm getting on all of our hosts for not getting in our promotions during these shows, I got to kind of point to myself. So I better lead by example here. So promotion number 1. So we have a book release from yours truly. So check it out. We've left the link. Jackson, thank you so much for leaving the link in the chat. Disputed National Champions. It's a fun book looking at each year of the 1990s, because I consider this to be the formative decade in college football history in regards to determining championships and really setting the stage from moving to the bowl era of the polls, determining the national champion, into the bowl coalition, the BCS, the playoff era, 4 teams, 12 teams, and we even look at the 14 team model and how all of this would have played out. So it's a fun read. If you're a college football junkie, and I think you are because you're here, please check it out. Also, of course, check out Leanne's work on X, and that link, thanks to Jackson, is also in the chat, and you can follow Leanne as well as myself and the Voice of College Football official account on X. And Leanne and I are going to get together this week to talk recruiting and start a weekly segment where we break down SEC football recruiting. So we know that a lot of you recruiting addicts will be locked in on that.
Super excited about that. Like I said, a lot went on this weekend in the SEC. I won't talk about it too much because we want you to tune in tomorrow to the show. We'll be talking about Texas A&M Aggies. We'll be talking about the Alabama Ole Miss battle continuing for one of the top 5-star wide receivers in the country. We'll talk about some diamonds in the rough. Like I said, a lot of exciting things going on. But since we're on the recruiting topic, Ole Miss had another big weekend. Like I said, it's always it couldn't have been a better stage coming off the bye week. But like I said, when we get wins on the turf, we also get wins on the recruiting trail. And there was a lot of key recruits, including some former commits that are now, the words to every Ole Miss fan's ears is a flip to the SIP, and that definitely happened this weekend. Ole Miss was able to flip former edge, University of Central Florida edge, Tylen Lee. Man, when you look at this kid on film, you talk about the skill set when you see him, big frame and everything. But the first thing I'm going to say off, there's a lot of things you can't teach in football, and that is one of them is playing with heart. And I think that's what makes this player so dynamic. Tylen Lee, he's just one of those players. When you see him, he's out of Pace High School in Milton, Florida, not Milton, Georgia. I feel like he's a really underrated kid. He's only a 3-star, but man, when you see him, I mean, he talk about just dominating the trenches. We can talk about some of the offers he had: Miami, Kansas, Arkansas, Florida, Memphis, Louisville, everybody in the Power 4. And there you go. You brought up, still going strong, 8-1, trying to lead his team. They finish out district play against Milton in Florida. During his junior season, really dynamic. He had 61 tackles, 20 tackles for losses, 5 sacks. I mean, I can go on and on, Mark, about all the things this kid does. I mean, he's just super dynamic on the field. But, watching his film, kind of getting a take, this is another player that you can't help but get excited for. Not because he's a transfer, not because we don't get excited about the transfer portal at Ole Miss. I mean, come on, we're talking about the home of the portal king in Lane Miss, but I think in Ole Miss. But I think what I get really excited about is seeing, when we can build from young talent, because portal is so wishy-washy. And it's great to get talent there, but we also have to remember, if we get so much talent from the portal, that talent eventually is going to evolve itself out, whether they stay, whether they transfer, whether they go for the NFL. So when you find a kid like Tylen Lee, to an edge, to build your defense, that's something really excited about. Just kind of looking at his film, he's definitely possesses a quick twitch. He gets off the ball really quickly, has a high motor, with good feet. This is a kid, when you watch him, he never stops. He makes one play and then he makes another. And like I said, he plays with a lot of heart, and he's really physical. He tackles well. I mean, he's got a perfect frame. And another thing you talk about kids that you hear more about in basketball than you do about football, but this kid's got a long wingspan. And like I said, he's just got already so many strong skills and checks all the boxes. His athleticism is top notch. And like I said, he's another young kid that Ole Miss is going to bank on. And like I said, it's a great way to culminate a party in the SIP, a win over Oklahoma. It wasn't the prettiest win, but man, it was a win nonetheless. And then have a flip in the SIP in Tylen Lee. Like I said, former Central Florida commit, 3-star edge, and he is now declared to be an Ole Miss Rebel. A lot of exciting things, and we'll talk about it more on the recruiting show, but, got to talk with a lot of recruits who were on handed, to see this, they were just one of the things I talked about. I talked to, a few top recruits that were also trying to flip. And the main point was that aside from being oppressed from the atmosphere and the typical, of course, when you go into Oxford, you can't help but be won over by that. But when we're talking shop, we're talking ball. A lot of them talk about, especially your linemen. There was a lot of linemen tackles, um, defensive minded guys, and they said what really impressed them just was to see the resilience of Ole Miss during this Oklahoma game, because rarely is Ole Miss down, enough where you're kind of questioning, could Oklahoma come in here, and that's, when you're seeing a high school kid and they're seeing this, it's a lot of pressure on both sides of the ball. But a lot of the guys I talked to were just impressed by the resilience and how they saw Ole Miss answer to not such a great Oklahoma team, but definitely an Oklahoma team that came to play. So, it's exciting. It's Wednesday, so there's a lot going on, which means I'll be on the road. And on Friday, I won't be going to Houston. I won't be going to Dallas to look at our typical 4 or 5 star, those names that you hear. I'm really excited about this weekend going close to home. There's another kid that Ole Miss is getting really excited about. He's a 2027, and I know for everyone who's not in the recruiting world, 2027 seems a lot long. And why are we looking? But man, you got it. You got to get ahead in the game, and I really love what Ole Miss is doing here, out in the south side of San Antonio, Texas. Braden Booth, class of 2027 athlete. Just no star kind of kid, really flying under the radar right now. We are his first SEC offers. He's got an offer from, UTSA, Incarnate Word, South Florida, Texas Tech. But man, I'm really excited to see this one. Just some quick things, that I'm sure Ole Miss has already seen in him. He's got size, speed, athleticism. He's really quick off the line and closing speed. I can't help but stress on that closing speed. And this kid's got it. I mean, he finishes on every play. This guy, just his will and what he's going to do at the next level, and his jump off the ball, like I said, being so young, he hasn't quite reached all the ceilings, but he definitely has the tools in the toolbox right now to be really dynamic again. Ole Miss has jumped on him. We've already offered him. And that's a name that Ole Miss Rebels want to know. Braden Booth, 2027, over at South San High School in San Antonio, Texas. So yeah, I'll be spending some time in the south side of San Antonio, watching it, maybe another dynamic Rebel. But like I said, a lot to be excited about. And we're about 5 weekends away, I believe, from early sign-in period, which might as well be the national signing period, because that's kind of when everybody gets the bulk of everything, Mark. But again, a big win in Oklahoma against Oklahoma at home really, really opened the floodgates for Ole Miss. We saw a lot of offers going out. We saw a lot of kids who were on visits that got offers. So that's also really exciting. You come, expecting to catch and all the things, and then leaving with an offer. That means a lot to these kids and these families. It just goes to show that, that your work is paying off. But again, we'll be talking a lot more about recruiting with a lot of these kids. A lot of them will start district play, regional play, playoffs and state championships will be here before you know it. But again, recruiting never ends. Super excited where the Rebels are heading. A lot of that Texas flood continues to open. So we'll be talking a lot about Texas recruits and them heading to Ole Miss, because that's a new dynamic that I think that we're going to see. But like I said, lots to be talking about Ole Miss, and then definitely a lot of SEC recruiting coming up here in our show.
All right, folks, here is the deal at the Voice of College Football. We have a new Ole Miss channel, and has been the case with the other channels that we have now grown to almost 10,000 with Miami, for example. Michigan's at over 8,000, Ohio State at roughly 8,000. We had to get a lot of you who are not fans of those teams to subscribe to the channel. So please do that for us, regardless of who you root for. If you love what we do here at the Voice of College Football, please check out the Ole Miss channel and just sub to the channel, because YouTube at a certain point will take the channel seriously and will start to drive it into traffic. But until that happens, which is usually around 1,000 subs, it is difficult to get views and to get subscriptions on that channel. So please help us out, regardless of who you like, who you root for, anything. If you enjoy what we do here at the Voice of College Football, please support the Ole Miss channel by subscribing there. And once we get to 11 or 1,200 subs, go ahead and unsubscribe, do whatever you want at that point, but please help us out in that way. Leanne and I will be here after the Ole Miss Arkansas game to do post game, and we will have a recruiting segment available coming up starting this week as well. All right, Leanne, we appreciate you doing this as always. You make this show go, and you are the one who makes it go first and foremost. So thank you so much for your time and expertise.
I appreciate it, and you as well. And like I said, if you're headed to Arkansas, we haven't really talked about it, but we'll take your umbrellas because it's 70% chance of rain. So this one might get really dirty in the trenches. But again, I think for Ole Miss, I can't stress it enough. The keys to the game is just trying to make sure that they control this ball early. What we saw in Oklahoma's second half is the way Ole Miss needs to come out of the gate. And they need to do it for 4 quarters of football. I think just limiting turnovers and then continue to improve on that offensive front. I think our defense is going to take care of business as always. They're going to keep it in the game, but we have to remember that while defense wins championships, we still got to put points on the board and take some risks. So, like I said, it's going to see which team can play a bigger, cleaner game and who's going to gamble better, Lane Kiffin or Sam Pittman. But we'll see how it goes and we'll see you at the post game on Saturday. Hotty toddy.
Yes, absolutely.